Recorded this. All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the largest, fastest growing, and the most active uh, global meetup. It's really, it's large scale Scrum, but it's really uh, more inclusive than just large scale Scrum. We have people that would have different interests at this point, and we will talk about business agility, organizational structure, um, funding, vendor management, HR, norms and policies in depth. So this is a very inclusive group. So today's topic is, um, how do I say this correctly? So I would like to talk about in essence, the problem that on minds of everyone, if not everyone, on minds of many, and it has to do with the current trends and shifts in the industry, and it impacts many companies, many organizations. Today we'll talk about the life cycle, or the path, the happy path and the unhappy path of the. I refer to this as an agile power tower, aka the organizational structure that's responsible for agile transformation, um, and various organizational changes, presumably that should make your organization more adaptive, more nimble, more light-footed, more agile. Okay, so I do not have a deck, but I do have a mirror board, and I will be leveraging what I have on the mirror board. So you should be able to see my screen. Do you not see my screen? Can you see my screen? Not yet?
Yes, I can.
Confirm.
Hey, something I did to stop sharing. Now I should be sharing my mirror board again. Can you see?
Yes, sir. It's just real small.
The
Blow it up,
details.
No,
please. There you go.
it will get
Mhm.
bigger. It will get bigger. All right, so
Much
let
better.
me walk you through again. So this is the topic of today's discussion. I also accompanied this discussion with the graphic of my own making. It says at the top, hitting the riff reef. Who will survive? And this is I'm playing with words. This is the reef, and RIF, for those that may not be familiar with the acronym, stands for reduction in force. Okay. So, and you were asked if your time allowed you to do so, to review these two articles to potentially set you up for this discussion, maybe even help you form a bit of a preconceived notion, but it wasn't really, it wasn't awfully biased. If you read it, you probably would associate with many problems that we're exposing in these two pieces. One was co-recorded with my colleague James Carpenter, and the other one was actually, a few years back. It was the result of it was the summer. It was the result of individuals' research and contribution by at least, I would say, more than half a dozen of organizational design consultants and coaches. And if you haven't had a chance to read this, please do, because this could be also revealing. Okay. So let me start with this high level cycle. And there's really no best place to start, but for all intents and purposes, I will start here. I will start here with this block. And it reads as follows: initiation of Agile Power Tower. And when we say Agile Power Tower, we're referring to the org structure that is given funding and permissions to define and run agility for the rest of the organization, in which case we don't really know what is meant by an organization, because various companies treat it differently. Now, in my experience, it's usually big. It's usually, almost like unpack and install on the entire org structure, and they run the show. And how it usually starts, it starts with some people of senior level, most likely joining an organization coming from elsewhere. Sometimes it starts from within by assigning an individual in a particular role to run the show. And this is essentially, again, there's no start or finish, but we will use this as the point of reference for now. And then once the go-ahead is given, it typically takes on, a pretty, it goes in a direction of expansion and exponential growth. Sometimes it's just a linear growth. It's subjective, either very steep, very fast linear growth of the org structure, or sometimes if there's a lot of, there's a lot of investment made into this structure, it grows almost hyperbolistically. Okay. And then over time, this org structure reaches what's called the period of complacency and stagnation, which means it exists, it still grows a little bit, but it's pretty stable, pretty steady, and it's almost like a happy land. It's the la 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 land for many of those people that are part of the structure. This is where you see people, telling you lots of success stories. People that are more elevated, they get to travel, they go to conferences, they do lots of presentations. It's the good times, as they call them, right? The good times. As time goes by, of course, just like with any good time, right? It may come to a halt, to an end. And there was a period of what I refer to as a political unrest, where this org structure called an Agile power tower becomes a subject of scrutiny. And whoever, let's just leave this out for now, but it's usually people that pay the bill and people that provide funding. They start asking questions like, what do we get for all of this? Like, we have been investing millions and millions of dollars into this. What's the result? Do we have any tangibles? And this is where everyone gets a bit of a hit in their backs. And then we see attempts to reorg, restructure, reduce how many people we have. And this is where we start picking and choosing who stays, who goes, what happens to individuals that are a part of this Agile power tower. Some people get promoted in ranks, some people move out. And by the way, this is just an introductory discussion. I'll jump on the more detailed system model in a minute. And then, of course, this inevitably leads to reduction in force, people being marginalized, people being reduced in importance. And it usually hits those that are at a lower level of the pyramid, of the food chain, as we call it, right? And let's just call it the end of the cycle. But since this is it's a turbulent cycle, it does repeat itself. There's what's called a rinse and repeat on a most likely on a smaller scale, because every time we go into a spiral, we go into a loop. We have some historical memories about what happened the first time, and it usually comes with a few senior executives leaving and some other coming in, and the new ones may have a different agenda. Now, I have this dollar sign here as well, and you may ask why. Well, because when senior executives come and go, they usually do this also driven by compensation. A lot of it is by compensation, and this is pretty significant compensation. And then there is a chance that this cycle will repeat itself. Okay, so this is just a high-level cycle. So let me move on and take a slightly deeper deeper look into this, okay? So a typical case, at least in my experience, and I'm speaking from I would say pretty rich experience of seeing large organizations going through this in cycles. Some of the organizations I've seen going through multiple cycles of the same over the last decade and a half. So this is a firsthand experience. So again, a typical case would be a high-level executive either joins the firm or is assigned from within. And because they are also treated in a more traditional way, the expectations of them are rather very traditional. They're tasked with increasing productivity, efficiency, speed of delivery, stuff that's almost like common language for any organization, traditional stuff. So we're optimizing for things that are very, very traditional. And of course, with that comes, the need to decrease costs and headcount. And you may look around yourselves and see many companies actually, it's their strategic goal to reduce a headcount and go into the geography of cheap labor, and therefore these are more traditional goals. And somehow, and this is obviously it's questionable to me, highly questionable. It's a mistake as far as I can see. There is a belief that somehow Agile can help with that, to decrease costs, decrease headcount. This is, and we can discuss this at length, but this is certainly not a good motivation to become more agile, or for them it's really not being agile, it's really doing agile, and they just go through motions like a cargo cult. So this is now we're looking at the system model, relatively light. So this arrow essentially means if this belief is to prevail, then the likelihood of us creating the Agile Power Tower, and all of these names are just synonymous with it, and Enterprise Agility Office, Center of Excellence, Agile Transformation Bureau, you name it. It will be a result of it. So if this belief is strong, the likelihood is going to be high. In fact, one of the ways to visualize it is to put a plus sign to it. Control copy, Control V. Okay, forgot to do it. Now, some additional system variables that will amplify this would be such as overall size of the organization. The bigger you are, most likely, the more chance you have this internal power tower. A number of leftover people that need to stay busy. And these are the people that typically they find themselves somewhere out of luck and being misplaced or displaced by these organizational shifts. Traditional roles, single function specialties, the list is pretty long. And then the prevalence of traditional organizational structure with number of layers and managers. So these are the amplifiers. These are the catalysts of this cause and effect relationship. By the way, I am supplying this graphic to also visualize what this Agile Power Tower is like typically, and some of the stuff that they do, some of the stuff that they promote. So I'm not going to parse each graphic in detail because it's going to just take a lot of time. But just think about it this way: Agile Power Tower may essentially be not what you wish it to be. Let me take another angle here. So we talked about this, the misbelief that Agile can make you become more cost effective, decrease headcount, optimize for productivity, efficiency, and velocity and speed of delivery. That's really not what Agile is all about. There's another factor that comes into play. This is very practical, very realistic. And I don't mean to be dismissive, but this is just something I have seen a lot, and you probably have too. Number of Agile for non-IT people. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. Why would this term or concept even exist on its own? Because it almost like creates a segregation and separation of duties, and creates an antagonistic environment organizationally between people that do product development and people that do not do product development. I refer to this as a fragmented agility. And I also suggest you pay attention to this, because if you see signs of this, this is a sign of some sort of dysfunction, like Agile in sales by itself, Agile in vendor management by itself, Agile in HR or business. Now, all of these are important constituents of organizational agility, but not something that should really exist on its own and compete with other org structures. Okay. So that's another factor that comes into play, and it does make your system respond to this. How exactly, we're going to see in a minute. Here's another system variable here, and I'm pointing to it through these two from these two variables. Likelihood that the Agile Power Tower grows. There's a negative sign here, minus sign here. it will decrease the degree of authentic business agility, aka involvement of real business people, lines of business. We refer to them also as revenue centers, something else I'm going to mention in a second. But the same token, these Agile for non-IT people are really not the proper way to instill business agility into your organization. So there's also a negative side to it. Just because someone does not understand technology, does not understand how to develop, does not automatically mean that we need to create almost like a stream, almost like a religion that becomes a counter intuitive counterbalance to what sometimes people mistakenly refer to as IT agility. So those two we covered. Now, another big one, another important one, and this will all come together in a minute. Our ability as an organization to define real products becomes very critical. And I am going to use another graphic here to illustrate something. This is what I see many companies, especially large ones. It's very, very, very well known at banks. We call it a productization saga. Everything that moves under the sun, everything that has life to it, is now called a product. We turn every component, every application into a product. Why? Because we don't really need to change an org structure for this. We don't need to change the way our teams are structured and how our managers manage teams. So, of course, if you read this line by line, you will see that each one of these is not a product, it's a component. Now, why is this important? Because if we are failing to define a real product, it is highly unlikely. And by the way, ability to or desire to define a real product, if this variable goes up, there's a positive, there's a plus sign. You will increase the likelihood that the real product owner can function as a real product owner, which includes controlling the budget, measuring a return on investment, and doing all other things that a key business person should and can do. Now, if we have this productization saga, obviously our ability will be low. And if this is low, then the likelihood will be also low. The likelihood of a product owner being involved in real type of activity that's, for the PO will be also low. And so good leads to good leads to good, and the degree of authentic business agility will obviously drop. So just so for those of you that are not familiar with the system model, if ability is high, then the likelihood is high, then the degree of authentic agility is high. And the opposite is true too. If the ability is low, the likelihood of a PO in being involved in the PO-like activities is low, and therefore degree of business agility is low. And lo and behold, we want our business agility to be high. Not like so, not through the Agile for non-IT passkey coaching, real business agility. Real business agility will effectively increase our ability to measure a true return on investment of our Agile transformation. And this color coding means something to me. It helps me read through my my sticky notes. You may or may not need to follow the same color coding as I do. To me, red is something I really don't like. Green, something that I do like. So degree of authentic business agility, if this goes up, then the ability to measure Agile transformation ROI will also go up. And I'm going to pause here just for a minute. I'm not opening up for questions yet, but ask yourself this question. Is this true or false? That the return from the Agile transformation divided by the investment in the Agile transformation should be more than one. Now, this is not about making things cheaper, folks. It's not about making things cost effective, as sometimes we hear people say. But it's really about long-term benefit, economic benefit of becoming more adaptive. Because we do not want to have this picture when a CEO, by the way, a product owner should be considered as a mini CEO. When a CEO is asked for more money, more, give us more money. We need to feed this entire org structure called Agile power tower. So we do not want to have a company milking itself for funds without actually seeing tangible, meaningful results. And worse yet, when this comes in a form of someone else coming from the outside and doing the same. Now, ability to measure Agile transformation ROI. If this ability is high, again, we have a plus sign here, then the likelihood that Agile transformation funding decisions will be made based on real empirical data and objective conclusions is going to also go up. Why? Because we are actually measuring things that are meaningful, that are important to us. And therefore, if so, we should be able to decide whether or not further funding is reasonable, if we should continue doing that. This one of my favorite shows. It's a great one. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? So we should avoid asking this question at the end of every fiscal year. And lo and behold, you probably have seen this in many places where whoever is in charge of running an Agile transformation sends the message down to the rest of the power tower. By the end of 2022 or 2021 or 20, I'm giving you what's in the past, we need to be 75.893, whatever that crazy numbers, % Agile, whatever the heck that is. So this is also, I'm trying to be friendly but ironic and facetious here also at the same time. We shouldn't be asking this question at the end of every year just because we're ending our fiscal year end, approaching our fiscal year end. We shouldn't be asking this question because that will lead to system gaming. Because everyone is going to want to check the checkbox to say, yes, we are Agile now. We should stop. We can, wrap up and throw in a towel. Why? Because everyone's bonus depends on it, especially if you're at a large bank or an insurance company. Another important set of variables, let me introduce them before we move on. And I really want this to be turned into a conversation at this point, at some point. So influence of traditional partnerships with tooling companies. Well, first, let me step back for a minute. Let me introduce the concept of a triple taxation triangle. And I've used this graphic quite a bit in my line of work. Sometimes it resonates. Sometimes it's being called inflaming and provocative. I'm happy either way. There are no specific names attached to it, but my big claim would be that when a large consultancy, coupled with a tooling solution and a big bang Agile framework, when they come into your house, when you come home, they will take too much money from you. They will cost you a lot. And I call it a triple taxation on a client company, something I recommend avoiding because it's just a very costly, very unjustifiable expenditure. And it comes because of so some of the system variables that impact this: strength of partnership with large consultancies, traditional relationships. We just don't know what's happening between who knows whom. Again, if we are subject to this strength, if it's high, then the risk of ending up with a triple taxation triangle is also going to be high. If there is also influenced by traditional partnership with tooling companies, it's going to also increase this triple taxation. And of course, because if you're a large organization, we have some rules and procedures for how to deal with vendors. So if the vendor management approach is very legacy, very traditional, then most likely it's going to amplify this problem. Well, we can only procure a large consultancy that has the minimum number of employees, that has the minimum number of $1 million in assets, but that's not really what's going to deliver value to you as a client company, does it? Is it? So we're kind of missing that part. the risk of creating a triple taxation, if this is high, it's going to lead to this what's called an agile theater. And I usually couple the term agile theater with the concept of the agile power tower because there's a lot of theater there. The risk of bloating agile transformation effort will, with too many roles, processing tools, it becomes very heavy and very complex. And at some point, if there is true empirical data exists and businesses catch on to this, they will ask a very natural question. Where does the money go? And we may end up with rifts. Now, one more piece here that I would like to add, and this is something that I probably should have introduced before, but I'll lead you into this at this point. There's another belief, and whether or not you subscribe to this belief, it's up to you. But I do. It's a very ancient German proverb, and I think it's verbatim, right? He who pays the piper calls the tune. Who gets to say what something should be? Who gets to say what what an agile transformation should look like? What optimizing goals we should have? What the tail end result should be? I think whoever pays for this, they have a lot of say in how it should work. So let's not forget that our business people, our lines of business, our product structures are profit centers. And let's not forget the difference between a profit center and a cost center, okay? And maybe this is a time you want to ask yourself a question. In your experience, who typically runs agile transformations? Cost centers or profit centers? Because if this belief is strong, then our ability, the ability of our business or a line of business or a product structure to hire their own agile transformation expertise, coaches, trainers, scrum masters, will also grow. It will be high. And then if so, ability for business to lead agile transformation and make R&D follow perhaps, not the other way around, will be also high, okay? And if our business people, our business structures are able to lead the show, to be in charge of this, then the degree of authentic business agility prevailing will be also high. Okay, so now I'm almost done here, but I would like to say something else. Because of this being done traditionally in a very traditional legacy way, with cost centers running the show, not profit centers running the show, and because there is not so much responsibility and sense of ownership and sense of I'm responsible for the money involved, we see lots of these things just going south, and we first see lots of bloating, lots of almost like metastatic bloating, right? And then an inevitable needs to shrink this thing. And very sadly that we see this in the form of rifts, reduction in force. These are not even therapeutic reductions. These are surgical reductions. And I'm sorry, I do not wish to become, I don't want to digress into too much medical analogy, but I think prevention is always better than radical treatment, right? So we might as well think about ways of preventing these exponential, uncontrollable growth of those power towers that eventually will subside. And with this graphic, I will just to almost wrap up on this one. The Agile Enterprise Transformation ship consists of many, many, many different people, right? Especially during the exponential or superlinear growth. Many people get procured, recruited from everywhere. But when stuff hits the fence, forgive my French, when things become really, really tough, your organization would have to make decisions. And it is very sad, and I'm probably going to, throw a curveball at some organizations. We see a lot of this we're going to lift off and go. So those people that were in charge, the heads of transformation, maybe high paid, higher ranked people, somehow miraculously they get to survive. They take off and they go, and everyone else who is in the lower deck, lower level, they start suffering. So you probably want to ask yourself a question: who you are, where you stand on this, where you're located organizationally, and why did you end up there? And a few tips, if I may, before I stop talking. If you can, try avoiding these power towers. Just don't join them in the first place, or at least if you have to join them, because it's almost inevitable. Look for opportunities to leave in a way that will be beneficial to you, but also to the rest of the organization in a way that you see, because this may not be necessarily consistent with the way the tower sees it. See if you can find a line of business, a true revenue center where you can join and in a more autonomous, more independent way to continue providing value. If you don't feel strongly about your current role of an agile transformation leader, coach, or trainer, it really depends what you have done in your life and what experience you may bring to the table. Just maybe reconsider and take another role. I mean, while it's still in this safety mode, in this I think I called it stagnation and complacency mode. While your org structure, while your agile transformation office is still in this stagnation mode, I'll look for a way out. If it really doesn't work out, you may want to just look for another opportunity elsewhere. And you definitely own yourself to look for these early signs. If you start seeing executives moving around or coming and going, and I think I mentioned, the cycle time roughly between 6 to 8 years for senior executive to do what they can and move on, because it's also, driven by budgets. See where tech executives are having, fender bender or friction with business executives. If you see this happening, if you see the beginning of it, it's a flag. Be careful. Take a closer look where senior enterprise coaches are moving. Those people that sit higher up in those power towers, they also have hierarchical structure. They have a better sense for what's going on. Just because they're closer to the funding, they're closer to decision making. If you see some of them are moving, if you see a senior enterprise coach, and by the way, it's a big question, how they end up being called enterprise coaches. Usually, for large organization, for large organizations, it's the direct reflection of someone's traditional pay grade. But if you see that moving, it's a sign. It's a sign you may want to consider also, taking action. Of course, if you see a hiring freeze all of a sudden, and it's in the middle of the year, where it really doesn't impact other org structures but impacts yours, it's another sign. And all and any signs of during a period of stable complacency and stagnation, if you see this end, and if you see some sort of a turbulence, you may want to consider making some calls and moving out. So again, this whole discussion is about how to help people that ended up in a position they did not mean to be. I'm pointing this into the business versus R&D for a reason. I would love you to consider yourself, if you think you're a business person, stay with business. If you are in technology, if you are a developer or a software engineer, of course you want to stand with R&D, but just you have to understand what's a cost center, what's a profit center. And if you're in the role that requires explicit funding, you may want to get closer to the source of funding. It's just safer that way. Okay. And the last but not least, I'm going to point this to the arrow. I'm sorry. I'm going to point the arrow to this article that was written way back when about balancing between centralized and decentralized coaching. It actually refers to the legendary U.S. Army General General Stanley McChrystal and his book, The Team of Teams, where he described decentralized coaching. I'm sorry, that wasn't coaching. This decentralized control and operations of cross-functional military units. But the point here is that it's just a great read. The point of this article was to explain why balancing between centralized and decentralized is very important. And in today's day and age, it was written like 6 years ago. I would put more money and more confidence into decentralized organizational and agile coaching, simply because those power structures, those power towers, they're typically optimized for their own existence and their own metastatic growth that at some point comes to a halt. And when you then do an ROI measurement, you don't really see much much benefit. Okay, so I'm going to pause now because this was too much for my own monologue, and I want to open up if you have any questions or thoughts. Let's turn this into conversation. Just want to, if you want to just raise your hand or unmute and speak up, that would be fine. Let's see for Rod. Did you unmute to say something, or you still on mute? Maybe without explicitly saying anything, how many folks, like with a raise of a virtual hand, like a yellow hand, on Zoom, give a sign, give a signal that what you heard just now is resonates, is consistent with some of your observations and some of your personal experience. How many? I have a few hand. Margaret, Allie. Anyone else? Bob. So do you wish, again, this is not meant to be a monologue. It's of course better to have it as a dialogue. Do you wish to share some of your sentiments, some of your thoughts?
I have a question. This is Margaret.
Margaret, sure.
So implementation of Agile is tough, right? We all, I think we can all agree on that, right? Successful, I don't know even how that is clearly defined, but so I see what you're saying. Like in my experience, R&D has always been the the responsible unit, right? For, and as we say, cost center for implementing Agile. And so when you say, get a profit center to adopt this business agility, what is an example of that? Which, I hate to use the word department, but what business unit do you think would be the most successful in leading this charge?
So the question is, what business, what structure, what organizational structure would be
But
more?
you were saying, it'd be better if a profit center took on the agility transformation. So, what's an example of how would you define that? Which profit center?
Well, it's a good
say in
point.
a large or medium, yeah.
I may want to go back for a minute to this graphic here. So when we say productization saga or productization going wild or going off tracks, we typically are alluding to inappropriate product definition, when things are really not properly defined, when you just relabel existing org structures, because these teams, front-end component team, middleware component team, API component team, these are component structures. These are teams, these are traditional org structures, and they are not aligned with the cross-cutting, cross-component cutting product definition. So a good way to think of a cost, of a profit center would be to think of a proper product definition that actually can demonstrate a real cash flow, a real revenue flow from real buying customers all the way down through to the product and funding product initiatives and product development, which inevitably will lead to funding teams and product groups that are responsible for development. And by the way, with this approach, the whole idea of funding, the whole idea of sponsorship becomes super easy because you know exactly who's involved in product development, and your product, if it's expected to provide value to customers, it will generate a revenue, and this revenue becomes your fund, becomes your source of funding. So
Okay.
I would consider structuring your organizational design, restructuring your org structure around your product definition properly defined, as opposed to having your products defined around your existing organizational design. And then if so, here we go. This source of funding would be a way to fund for, to compensate for coaches and organizational design consultants that would be involved. So that would be a much leaner and much more direct way to engage, as opposed to working in large components, many components that would be somehow then rolled into an R&D structure, and the R&D structure would be getting this traditional funding from business. And again, this isn't the session about funding per se, but let's put it this way: with traditional funding, it would be probably more challenging to not support what we currently know as agile power towers. And that's why this whole discussion should also lead to another discussion: how do we do budgeting? How do we do funding? And this should be around improved product definition. So, Margaret, that's my attempt to answer your question.
No, that it makes sense, and yeah, and that's for better or for worse. The organizations I've worked for have been very, very focused on product, on product delineation, where we're our own, we're sort of like our own business unit. This product, that product. Because a lot of that came from just the natural result of merger and acquisition, right? A lot of us were acquisitions to a larger company, so then they sort of
But whatever it's worth, this is the image I would like to use just to amplify my point. So funding should really follow this. You really need to define a product, and based on that, you will effectively end up with redefining your or product organization, including the teams. And funding should go from products into teams. And the same exact funding you would spend on your Scrum Masters, on your technical coaches, on your team coaches, on your organizational coaches, because you will be building your organization around a product, as opposed to what you traditionally have when you have products, fake products, defined around traditional organizational structures, such as components and applications. Kathy, I see you raising your hand. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, so one of the things I've noticed is that they are getting rid of agile transformation teams and putting together product operations teams, which I think is maybe that's the way you're phrasing it, is, if you've got the product side, hopefully they're more of a profit center than the tech side. So I just, in several places, I've seen them getting rid of the Agile Transformation Group, and instead the PMO is becoming this product operations team, and all the agility leads or agile delivery leads now are part of product.
You're speaking the language of an XYZ bank, which name, and I'm guessing the name of the bank, but I'm not gonna drop it here, just for because I wouldn't be very, very clean in what we're discussing here. But you're absolutely right. These agile delivery leads, which is pretty much a generic term now, typically refurbished, renamed, relabeled ex-managers, many of whom came from very traditional PMO structures. And as much as we want to ensure people have job security, this isn't really the role that has any future, really. I mean, they set it up for failure from day one, from the very beginning. These towers, and I'm going to actually say something else to what you just said. These towers, it's like any empire eventually will cease to exist. And when you build these large towers, you will essentially create a tower, will create an enterprise, a kingdom that eventually will crumble. I was looking for this graphic here. Oh, here I found it. So the power tower will not really be forever. It will eventually crumble. And when you decentralize and you move and I'm not suggesting to completely, eradicate agility. Quite the opposite. What I'm suggesting, not to turn this into a circus or a theater. When we decentralize it, when we move it exactly where it belongs, we are creating the natural need for scrutiny and for enhanced, increased sense of responsibility for what we're doing and where we spend our money. When you centralize everything and you create this tower country club, you essentially are putting many things under the rug, and any waste and any emissions, we shall not be able to see it, and people will be just continuously adding more complexity to the very organizational structure whose responsibility actually is to remove waste and overhead. So it becomes even a little ironic, right? We recreate the very complexity and overhead in the structure that's responsible for removing it. So when we move it, so agility persists, agility remains. It's a very critical. Adaptiveness I like the word adaptive more than the word agile, but it has to be closer to action, more autonomy, sovereignty, purpose, and independence. The minimum, dependent. I don't call it dependency. If there is any need for synergy and synchronization between different products and how they run their business, it could be done through means of communities of practice or functional learning. Yeah, that was it. We got a few minutes remaining. Anyone else wishes to chime in? If not, I'll just, I want to make sure people don't start dropping quickly. I just want to make sure we end on the right note. So the goal here was to, just to talk openly and candidly about some of the very frequently seen, yet not often spoken openly about dynamics, and also give everyone maybe an aha moment about what they should be expecting to happen to themselves and in the nearby future, and just be on alert, because as someone said once, I forget who he was, one of the Agile Manifesto co-signers, I do remember who he was. I'm not going to drop his name. He said, I actually don't like helping large organizations because, it's almost like, I can't really, I'm just a small person, but I love helping people at large organizations, individual people. So hopefully with this discussion also, there's some help, some aid for people that are either struggling to understand what's going on, or considering their next move, or trying to think what to do next, or maybe not able yet to read well the road signs, maybe because they're relatively new to this. Hopefully they will be able to read some of these early road signs and make proper decisions. So essentially we're trying not to we're trying not to amplify force reduction and promote the idea of rifts. We're trying to explain why they're happening, and also maybe advocate what needs to be done in order to either reduce them in general or avoid being sucked into them. Okay, anyone else wants to chime in? Anyone else wants to share anything? Going once, twice. So we're gonna probably wrap this up. And before we do, just want to say one more time that we have a few exciting presentations coming up in the next few weeks. Let me move the screen over here so more people can see. In a week, exactly 1 week from now, we're gonna have an interesting, a very interesting discussion with Bob Schatz. That's the subject of his discussion. And it's on December 13th, same exact time and place. And in January, second week of January, we're going to have Joanna Rothman coming back to us, also speaking on a very, I would say, relevant to this discussion. She's going to talk about a fake Agile and how to alleviate this. Because if you think about this systemically, holistically, Agile Power Towers, Agile Theater, fake agility, they are all kind of come together, and we can, build a case out of it. So I'm a big proponent, and many of you are too, proponent of authentic original agility, just, going back to the basics. And, that's just mark your calendars with these great events. Thank you all for joining. We'll meet again very soon. Have a great the rest of their weekday and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Gene. I'll see you next week.
See you, Bob.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you, Nancy.